music that was that emanated from two great patronesses of music. The first was Margaret of Austria, who, and the second was Isabella d'Este. Now, Margaret of Austria was, both of these women, not only were they great patrons of the arts, but they became very astute politicians as well. Poor Margaret of Austria, her parents were Maximilian and Mary of Burgundy. And when she was 3 years old, she was engaged to be married to the son of the King of France. But, and so she was sent to the French court to be, raised to be a proper Queen of France. And when she was 9 years old, the king decided to make a different kind of alliance, and so he married his son. This was Charles. It was Louis XI, and his son Charles, who was supposed to marry Margaret of Austria. Instead, he married Mary of Brittany. He arranged for his son to marry Mary of Brittany, and that meant that poor Margaret of Austria had to go back to the Netherlands to be looked after by her grandmother. And then, Charles decided to marry the Duchess of Brittany. Anyway, so when she was 17, Maximilian decided to marry her off to John, who was the son of Ferdinand and Isabella, famous Ferdinand and Isabella. And so she married him, but he died 6 months later. So they had no children, but she still got to keep her, she was then the Duchess of Astoria, because that's what her husband had been. So she went back to the Netherlands again, and then when she was 21, she married the Duke of Savoy. And the Duke of Savoy, he died 3 years later. So she was sort of full of bad luck. But she went back to the Netherlands, and she became the regent of the Netherlands for her nephew. And she was the governor of the Netherlands. And she was a really, really good diplomat. And she managed to make sure that all the, the Netherlands at that time were the Flemish lands. The Low Countries were really famous for producing wool, and wool was incredibly important. And she managed to get all of Europe buying her wool and sort of make her kingdom shine. And she patronized the arts a lot. Erasmus was at her court, and this was up in Mechelen in present-day Belgium. And she's very well educated. She played instruments. She wrote poetry, and she was born in 1480, by the way, and she died in 1530. So, and she was governor of the Netherlands for the rest of her life after that. The second patroness was Isabella d'Este, and she married Francesco Gonzaga of Mantua. She was actually from Ferrara herself, and she became sort of the Duchess of Mantua, I guess. And her husband Francesco was often called away for different fights here and there. And in fact, at one point, he was taken captive by the Venetians. And this was all at the time of, the start of the religious wars, and people were making alliances left, right, and center that kept on changing. She was born in 1474, so she was a little older than Margaret of Austria, but she lived to 1539. She lived a decade later. We know a lot about her because she wrote lots of letters, especially to her sister-in-law, who was Elisabetta of Gonzaga. And so her life is really well documented. But anyway, she was also very well educated, she played the lute. But whenever her husband went away, she effectively managed his army. And she was very successful in stopping the French from invading, and she actually went to Rome to arrange for some treaty, and she was there at the sack of Rome in 1527, and she turned her big house into a place of political asylum for people who would otherwise have been killed in Rome. But when she went back to Mantua, she was in Rome for a couple of years. She finally went back to Mantua. Her husband died, and she took over all the duties of that the Duke of Mantua would have had. And she was apparently an incredibly smart politician. And also, she was a musician. She played the lute. And one of the very special things about her life about her court, was that, when she went back to Mantua, she also started a school for girls. And, but she read Machiavelli, apparently. But she had a special little private study still you can see it in the palace at Mantua now, in the villa at Mantua. And she patronized these lute players who wrote frautole, which were the sort of new kind of folkish love poetry. They weren't folk poetry, but they had a much simpler form than the old forms of poetry. And the two big composers, Tromboncino and Marco Cara, composed frautole to this new poetry, and it totally changed the course of music in the 16th century, because instead of being this dense polyphonic music, like the music, we're going to play some of that, and like the music that Grace's group just played, this was suddenly much simpler, more homophonic, and it sort of set the road for the simple French, the Parisian chanson, and the style, as that got elaborated into the madrigal that became so famous, not just in Italy, but in England, and lasted in England for, 2 generations after it died out in Italy. So what we're going to be playing this afternoon, are 2 pieces with this dense Flemish polyphony from composers that were at Marguerite's court. And then the last 3 pieces will be this much lighter style of that was ushered in the new music of the 16th century from the court of Isabella d'Este. Sorry, long-winded, but it's interesting.